Good evening. Good evening. So, I wanted to first and foremost thank you all for coming. My name is Darren Cooper. I'm the president of the Student Planning Association, and we really just we're excited to have all of you here tonight. We're definitely glad you decided to take some time to spend the evening with us. We've got a phenomenal project that we're going to be talking about tonight. It's an opportunity for all of us to get educated and pose some questions regarding this particular MMPT project and the impact it'll have on this wonderful city of Atlanta and the region. Um, as I go into a couple different things, I do want to point out our moderator for the evening is Marion Phillips, the vice president of the Student Planning Association here. So she will definitely be orchestrating this wonderful discussion. And one of the things that we wanted to go through is actually we've got some fun things planned for everybody tonight. So participation is going to be key. So that being said, over here on the far right, we've got a poll that everybody can participate in. And the way that this is going to work is that all of you all that have cell phones, or if you've got a laptop and you're on Wi-Fi, you can actually text to the code to text to is 22333. So we're going to start off the evening with this question. What type of transportation did you use to get to this presentation today? If you came by bicycle, as somebody did, text in 350-681 to 22333. All right, so we got some nice variety going on here. Oh, we're the transit folks. All right, so I think we've got a pretty dominant option here. I don't think we're going to see too much adjustment. So now we can see what the different modes of transportation that everybody's using. This is going to be very interesting as we go into the discussion this evening. So the next question we've got is actually regarding the multimodal project itself, and just to kind of gauge everybody's awareness of the project, we'd like to see, where do you sit? Are you unfamiliar with the project? Are you very familiar with it? Let's see where everybody lands. Okay, so we got a lot of slightly familiars here tonight. That's a good number of folks that are very familiar. Are the panelists, are you guys responding to this? Great. Well, that being said, the intent of this program tonight is, again, information sharing, get you all outside of the slightly familiar or unfamiliar territory and see if we can get you more comfortable and more familiar with the project. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the chair of the School of City and Regional Planning, Dr. Bruce Stiftel, as he's going to move us forward into the program and taking it over from there.
Thank you, Darren. I want to wish you a happy World Town Planning Day on behalf of the School of City and Regional Planning. The school has been promoting and imagining sustainable, resilient, and just places for 60 years. We have 1,400 graduates working in 49 U.S. states and 29 countries. And we have a deep Atlanta footprint, but we are a research-led, globally engaged organization. Let me say, I think there are two frames that we often think about, or that people use when they think about public transit. And one of those frames is that the only people who ride transit are those that don't have choices. Second frame is that transit can be a preference for those who have many choices, a preference that promotes quality of life in our cities. Nationwide, I think this second frame of preference is on the uptick. There have been 9 new light rail transit systems in the United States in the last 10 years. Atlanta is about to join that cadre. We hear that young people are increasingly choosing not to get driver's licenses. and to rely on transit and bike ped modes as the way to get around. Achieving transit as a choice, as a preference, requires convenience. The multimodal terminal, I think, is very much in the mold of thinking about building convenience for transit passengers in the Atlanta area. And so I'm eager to hear what the panelists have to say tonight. Let me thank the panelists for being here, and let me also thank the core of SPA members and city planning students who've organized tonight's program. And maybe I can ask you to stand. I think there's something like 14 of you, so I don't want to call everybody by name, but if you were working on tonight's program, would you let us thank you? And welcome to everyone. Happy World Town Planning Day. Oh, let me call Derek Cameron to the microphone. Derek is project manager at Georgia DOT and has been responsible for a good part of the imagination of what the multimodal terminal is going to look like. Derek.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I am Derek Cameron with the Georgia Department of Transportation. I'm the project manager for the Multi-Modal Passenger Terminal project. So I'm just going to give you kind of a quick overview of what this project entails, and then we can, I guess, go into, I'll turn it back over to Marion. We'll go into questions for the panelists. This is the study site for the Georgia MMPT. As most of you may know, since I guess a lot of you are kind of familiar with the project itself, the study area is about 118 acres. It sits in the area that we commonly call the Gulch. It's a void in downtown Atlanta at the current moment. You can see it's centered along Phillips Arena, the CNN Plaza, MARTA 5-Point Station, and the federal buildings there. The MMPT itself will rest on the parking deck that's there between Spring Street and COP, Centennial Olympic Park. We have several agencies that are involved with this project with us. The Federal Transit Administration is our lead agency. They are the federal agency that's funding the project. GDOT is the lead agency who's administering the project at the current moment. We do have several cooperating agencies, the General Services Administration, the Federal Railroad Administration, and EPA. We also have the Federal Highway Administration, who is a participating agency within the project. One of the unique things about this project, it is on the presidential dashboard, the We Can't Wait initiative. That means it was selected and it is considered one of the nationally and regionally significant projects. And with that, what it gives to the project, it expedites our environmental process. And it could also provide some funding in the future. Another site of our study area, there are the 6 parcels that we originally, that's involved in the project. The MMPT itself will sit on parcels 1 and 2 that spans between the Phillips Arena and MARTA 5-Point stations. The other parcels will, of course, will be used for development, and those were the primary parcels used in our environmental document and environmental analysis. An artist rendition of the MMPT itself, we're kind of facing east, looking from Phillips Arena. You can kind of see Wall Street and Alabama Street will be reconstructed to be on viaduct level or bridged all the way over to COP, which will provide greater connectivity from Centennial Olympic Park over to Spring Streets. The Gulch itself today, it provides a great disconnect and provides a little means from getting one side to the other unless you really know what you're doing. I wouldn't advise trying to cross there. And as I mentioned, with our roadway network, we are going to bring Wall Street and Alabama Street up to grade on viaduct level. We're also going to be constructing a new roadway, and if I had a pointer, I can kind of show this to you. But the one that's running, I guess you can call it north and south on the slide there, we call that new north-south. The roadway network will help us create better ingress and egress in and out of the area. And also, this road will allow us to create better blocks, so it creates better economic ability for development. And then this is a shot of an artist's rendition of the gulch itself, of the MMPT once it's constructed, and what it looked like prior to any future development. Of course, everything here is labeled here, and I don't have a pointer to point anything out to you. But you can see the MMPT itself. It has a green roof, and it has parked. We also have it's the park that's to the lower center of the screen there is ADA accessible. You can walk from Phillips Arena all the way over to the 5 Points MARTA station and land at underground Atlanta without ever having to actually physically cross one of the roadways. With full build out, it is expected with our market research from that FIC, our developer has worked on, is that within this area, the development that could occur would be several office towers, the residential towers, and a new convention center hotel. Also, we've been in talks with GSA, who has over 4 million square feet of leased space that's outside the area. They would love to build a government center, so to speak, within the area also. With this project also, I guess you can call it the water feature that we build in there. It's a public amenity, but with it will help with the flooding problems that currently occur over in Vine City and English Avenue area. We can store and hold the water here and slowly release it downstream, and it will help us with the flooding issue. And there you can also see the just over 4-acre park that's going to be on the roof of the MMPT, and just on the inside of that, of course, will be restaurants and several other retail shops. Some of the environmental considerations that we had to look into while we're working on the project itself, and I think our panelists can do a better job of answering any questions pertaining to these few considerations than I can. So I'm not going to go into any great detail on these, but if you guys have any questions, please ask. So ends my brief overview.
So thank you, Derek. And to kick off our first question, we'll just go down the line here, easy one. What's your involvement in the project, and then why do you feel that the MMPT is important? Yeah.
Hello, my name is Heather Alhadeff. Hello, there we go. Thank you. My name is Heather Alhadeff. I work for Center Forward, but in my previous life, I've been in the public sector. And so the bulk of my role has actually been leading up to the project that's that you just saw being developed, was actually the positioning and advocacy for the project as a whole when I worked for the City of Atlanta as well as Central Atlanta Progress. So kind of the positioning it publicly as well as technically speaking amongst all the agencies, and you saw the list of agencies there at the federal level. Prior to getting it to this point, there was a lot of coordination required between GDOT and the city and Central Atlanta Progress and MARTA and everybody. So there were a lot more agencies to coordinate with, even the Beltline needs, whether or not that was necessary for the area as well. So there's a lot of technical things to look at and quite frankly, a lot of political things to go through to get it to this point. So that was pretty much my role. So the bigger outline that was the larger study area is what I can probably speak to the most tonight.
Thank you, Heather. My name's Chris Calvert. I'm with a firm called AKRF in New York. And Tim and I are part of the environmental consultant team for the project. So we're doing the environmental impact study. My firm was brought in by Tim's group because we work on similar projects in New York City where it's a complex urban environment, which brings a lot of difficult construction issues, approval issues, and we've had experience on that with the World Trade Center redevelopment. the Atlantic Yards project in Brooklyn, and this has a lot of similarities. So we were brought in to sort of provide that type of advice.
Thanks, Chris. My name's Tim Hatton with HNTB. We're working with GDOT as the primary consultant to deliver the NEPA document, along with Chris here from AKRF.
Good evening. I'm Herman Howard, and I'm here with KAI Design Build. We're architects and planners. And part of my responses have to deal with previous life, as well as what we're doing now. But I had the pleasure of working on this project for close to 10 years when it was just diagrams and studies and those sort of things. And then we had the opportunity while at HOK to work with Central Atlanta Progress in creating what was called the Green Line Study, which was, I think, pretty much the last of the final studies before these steps. So it's been a pleasure. It's been a great opportunity to really see what could be the potential impact of this project. And the reason that I think it's important is because this is one of those next steps that allows the city of Atlanta to truly become the second busiest hub for transit in all of the United States, only second to Chicago. So it's a great story. It's one of those things that has history, but also has very strong future opportunities. And it's been a pleasure to be involved.
Good evening. My name is Katrina Strickland, and I'm the Executive Director for the Clark Atlanta University Economic Development Center. My primary involvement is looking at how the redevelopment and the West Atlanta communities around the stadium will be impacted by the MMPT, and how we can help better design the roads, the various buildings and new development in those communities to work effectively with connecting to downtown Atlanta. Thank you.
Thank you all. So what type of transportation options are going to be available with the MMPT?
So it is truly a multimodal terminal. So short term, you may see regional buses, MARTA, with a long-term vision of commuter rail, high-speed rail, taxi services, buses, Zipcar, anything and everything under this one roof. So we want to make sure that to accommodate multiple modes, and those modes also work well with the overbuild. So it's going to be also a activity center into itself.
Thanks. And what do you all see as the radius for the economic impact? And how do you feel it will affect the downtown area, the AUC area, the downtown area as a whole?
I'll start that. Both Heather and I, we've been involved in some things that the city, CAP, and others, the Downtown Development Technical Advisory Group, I think the full name of it is called. And we've had the pleasure, the chance to look at an investment here is of X amount of dollars, but the potential of the investment surrounding the area is greatly multiplied if things are done correctly. As what was being said earlier, this was also planned to be the Southern High-Speed Rail, the eastern terminus. And with that, one would now be able to go from Atlanta to Birmingham in approximately 40 minutes, or from Atlanta to Houston in 4 hours. So it really begins to change the quality of life, how you live, work, play. I live up to 400. It takes me more than 40 minutes to go from Alpharetta to downtown Atlanta. So it really changes the aspects. What was also said was that right now this is a void. It's a gulch. It's not something you want to hang out and walk through, really not walk around. But when you look at the dimensions, it isn't that big of an area. And when you can capture that area, it begins to connect downtown Atlanta to the AU district. It connects it to historic districts. It makes connectivity to Georgia State. It really begins to build on that word of connectivity. not just at a local scale, but also at a national scale as well. So it's a huge economic development driver.
From an AUC perspective, and I say CAU, Clark Atlanta, but slash AUC, because a lot of the work that we're doing really impacts the entire university center. One of the major components we've been looking at is to create a transportation institute. In this community, what is typically called LMI, low to moderate income communities, I prefer to say low wealth, but those communities need training programs to help residents with either no education or limited education for jobs of the future. Transportation is a huge growth market, and if we can leverage our educational resources in that community to create transportation training programs as well as business development opportunities in the transportation arena, that's one of the areas we'll be focusing on.
As some of you may be familiar, Central Atlanta Progress has what they call the Green Line Plan, which is development plan from the state capitol to the Georgia Dome. I think the clever thing is dome to dome, walkable dome to dome or something like that. And that plan included a pretty major market development component, which was around 8 million square feet. In developing the MMPT project, the public-private partnership, which is being led by Forest City Integral and Cousins, affectionately known as FIC, their market analysis showed by building an MMPT with the components we have, they could actually achieve 12 million square feet of space within the Gulch. So their projection is doing this project could bring an additional 4 million square feet directly to downtown, and that could be any sort of commercial, residential, mixed-use type development.
I think something that's really important to think about is not only the destination itself being here in central part of Atlanta, but actually the origins of these trips are throughout the state of Georgia. And obviously if it were to move on to Texas and everything as well. So I think one thing that's missing from a lot of the dialogue is we've been measuring everything just from a transportation impact, but the land use impacts along the corridor itself is huge for other cities throughout the state of Georgia. And so to me, there is a national reach and a regional reach for the high-speed rail, but even in the interim with commuter rail, when you start connecting these towns and even Macon, I don't even remember how many years ago, 10, 15 years ago, redeveloped their rail, just the facility itself. You really start to change the dynamics for those cities. And there are many places in Georgia that need as much attention for economic development as Atlanta. And so you have a game changer immediately for Atlanta and the region, and then you have a pretty significant improvement for the state of Georgia, and then moving forward to it at a regional and subnational level. So I think it's underestimated the power of this project often.
And, just to wrap this up, early on when we were talking about this, talking about naming of it, and it became the Georgia MMPT. And that is to reflect the statewide impact that it does have. And one of our biggest supporters was Dana Lemon at the State Transportation Board, who's been a strong advocate for this. And I think it's important to recognize that this does have a statewide reach, and it's important for the state to take this on as a project.
Thank you. So in the early stages of the project, which I know we still are in early stages, but how much of it was inspired to help the Gulch and do something with that area versus a need for a multimodal passenger terminal?
I'll start. When we first started looking at this, and we had lots of maps and everything over the wall, we had asked a consultant to come in. And her comments were, what you should do is just flood it with water. And we're going like, okay, this is a train station. But what she was trying to make a point of was to create something that was so unique until everyone wanted to get as close to it as possible. In giving us examples of the San Antonio River, in giving us examples of Back Bay, Boston, giving us examples where there's something that is so unique until it doesn't exist anywhere else in the city. and in understanding what are so many hurdles with the site, the depth, the location, all these things, those hurdles really became pluses. And it became an opportunity to create a very unique destination, which there's some similarities. And part of our theme, part of our thinking was being able to arrive in a park by train. So not flooding it, but creating a very unique park in downtown Atlanta, but a park that also had some elements of connectivity back to Centennial Olympic Park, back to other smaller, even green spaces in the city of Atlanta. So there was an immediate response of what to do with the surroundings, and then to collectively connect those other parts of the city. So it was something clearly about how to transform the Gulch, but in that transformation, provide other benefits to the city.
Throughout our public involvement process, we've heard those same things reiterated, that there should be an iconic destination terminal. Something along the lines of, you go to New York and you go to Grand Central Station just to see the station itself. So that's been in the minds of the designers all along. Also, just in terms of that land use transportation connection, this is it's a great opportunity here. You've got the north, south, east, west MARTA lines. You're not far from the intersection of I-20 and the major connector on I-75 and 85. So you've got these modes occurring right there. You can tie it all together, and it's pretty amazing when you think about it, that there's this much space in such an area where it's got a ton of potential. So we think that not only with the transit investment, but with the market analysis shows that there's that same type of sustainability principles and bringing in land use and transportation together. And the multimodal terminal will be the catalyst to start that process. And to that end, there isn't really one single entity as a developer that could take on some of that investment. So that's where the P3, the public-private partnership, comes together. There's the public investment, and then the private money follows, and it all works together.
If you look back, early 1909 basically was some of the original plans for the area, and that actually was when we had the heyday of two stations and had lots of transportation access through the railroad tracks. So that was actually more about redeveloping the Gulch. That's always been a natural divide between crossing sections of the downtown area. And then I believe it was 1930, 31, 32, something around then, there was the Dixie Terminal, which was also a redevelopment. And I think at the time it was, I forget how many million square feet of development potential. So originally, when we had it as a great facility for transportation, the mindset was, this is wonderful land. It's already raised up above the railroad tracks. It would be wonderful for economic development and for creating square feet for office, mainly office at the time. And I think, 1972, both train stations were on, and Amtrak was pretty much killed that year, and so that's basically when that area didn't serve the transportation purpose either. So I think when you saw in the early 90s, when the focus back on the area, it really was kind of both. It's hard to say that the MMPT today that's being looked at is the chicken or the egg. It's really, you get both opportunities with it. So it is serving a transportation need, and at the same time filling a great hole that needs to be redeveloped. So it's kind of, I guess, dependent on what's been going on over time, but 1909 was the beginning of our planning for the area. So we've been at it for a minute.
So I know that, some lovely drawings and renderings. What at this point is final about the project, if anything?
The location, maybe. Yeah, we're probably going to be in the Gulch. We are probably going to accommodate buses, commuter rail in the future, intercity rail in the future, connections to MARTA 5 Points, CNN Center, MARTA Station. We are going to include open space, and we are going to include retail, new streets, and streetscape enhancements. Everything else is sort of still in flux. I mean, it's at the phase we're at, I would say it was about 10% design. Yeah. It's about 10% design. So a lot can change in the next 90%, but you know, in a few years, you'll go to the Gulch and see an MMPT.
And then up to this point, how have you guys engaged the community? How does the community feel about the project?
So these are the project-specific questions we're getting to. Yeah, this is great. So hopefully it was reflected in that poll earlier that we've done a pretty good job getting the word out. In terms of outreach, focus groups, stakeholder groups, technical committees, we've had the formal scoping process through NEPA, lots of outreach to MPUs, you name it, we've tried to do it. If you want a meeting, we'll be there. We want to promote this project and understand what the public wants to see, and that's been really we're an open book from the beginning. Even when the developer was on board, it was let's hear what the public wants for this. Some of that's driven by the technical components of what you can do and the track alignments and all that, but essentially we've said what's important to the public, and we'll try to get it into the design of the terminal.
I think what's really good about this is that it's not a singular statement. And what I mean by that is the MMPT has such potential to touch so many things. But when you add that to the potential of what's going on, what's proposed to be going on with the stadium, then you have to realize that from early numbers, at least out there, that there's well over $2 billion of investment. And the reach for that is huge. When you begin to have a conversation about transportation, then you're also engaging MARTA, you're engaging the Beltline, you're engaging the streetcar. And the more we have found out that the more people in community, the more people that know in communities, the more excitement there is. And I think right now there's really a need to share. There's a need to be real transparent and clear about the impact and what this can mean for your community and how you can become engaged. With some communities, there's clearly a new aspect about walkability. With some, there's a new aspect about the built transformation of the urban environment. And I'm so glad that someone mentioned the impact that it will have on the watershed conversation. So there's a number of concerns that the different communities have, and given the proper platforms, this begins to touch so many of those concerns. And that's a real exciting aspect, because it is one of the most important things going on in the city of Atlanta, even the state of Georgia right now.
So I wanted to say that you can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter also.
So what type of environmental remediation is going to need to happen to make this a reality?
We'll tag team on this one. As you know, it's been an empty site or an underused site for a long time. A lot of transportation uses, freight railroads, parking garages. Tim and I were down there one day, and there was a fire, like it was spewing oil fire, kind of. So we got out pretty fast. So there will definitely be environmental remediation. The extent we don't know yet. Part of that, you wait till you get more into final design. You need to know how deep you need to go for foundations and things like that to really make a full assessment. But we do know that there will be quite a bit.
Great. And I know there were some renderings, but what type of development are you guys expecting in the future in terms of office, retail? Is there a plan? Thought.
So the way this round of the multimodal passenger terminal is going is that it's envisioned as a public-private partnership, as I mentioned before, and as you can see from the rendering here, the terminal itself takes into consideration the overbuild. The two towers there to the northwest, let's call it, are envisioned as commercial. Okay, you could have a major headquarters relocation here. That'd be great. You could have some government uses. The two back towards 5 Points are envisioned as residential towers. So in total, you've got 4 towers envisioned over the top of the MMPT. We talked about those 6 parcels. That's the ground level. That's where some of the rail tracks and platforms would be. And then the overbuild to that is shown here just south of the extended Alabama Street. Those are envisioned as potential government center type uses. Also through the market analysis, it was revealed that there's a need for convention style hotel. So you're right adjacent to the World Congress Center, and there's an opportunity to bring in a major hotel with additional space for conferences. So overall, a mix of uses. In addition, the MMPT itself would accommodate some retail. I think there's estimated about 150,000 square feet of retail. So again, it gets to that. This is a destination. This is a place to go shopping. The restaurant space on top overlooking the green roof / park could be amenity for the restaurants plus the residential uses on top of the or adjacent to the MMPT.
Great. So overall, everything has seemed really positive up to this point. Where are you getting pushback about the MMPT in general, about the project, if any at all?
There's been a bit of pushback, at least initially, from the U.S. District Courts. We're right. We're their neighbor. They park there. Judges don't like to lose parking. But and a lot of other concerns, how will construction activities affect court proceedings? Concerns about homeland security with some of the sensitive uses in the Russell building, and so they've had a lot of concerns. We've been working with them on those concerns. So I wouldn't say as much as it's pushback, but it's not rah-rah project necessarily. It's good comments that have helped us think about it. We've also had some concerns from Castleberry Hill. Maybe Tim, you want to?
Sure. So we've tried to have a lot of outreach to the neighbors and the neighborhood and listen to some of their concerns. It's potentially a significant amount of construction, and with the MMPT and then the stadium right there, there could be 3 to 4 years of pretty active construction period. So, no one likes to have noise and pile driving going on in their neighborhood, so we understand that, and we'll work with them to try to mitigate some of those as best we can. It's also important that that the freight movement continue through here. So that's an important element of this, and we've made sure that we keep the communications open with the freight companies, and we'll work with them in the future. In terms of other issues, we'll see. We're still right in the thick of things. This spring, we'll come out with the draft EIS, so that'll be the opportunity for the public to comment on our analysis. It's the formal public hearing, and we'll listen to any other concerns at that time.
Most of our conversations have been with the surrounding communities and the surrounding neighborhoods, and there's been some hurdles to start with. Number one, 2 major streets, Northside Drive and Martin Luther King, they're streets that separate, not streets that bring together. There's efforts underway to transform that, and some excellent efforts. But I think a lot of the pushback, again, or the questions, which is probably better, comes with respect to the boundaries. And because it's a place that you don't pass through every day, it's kind of more than a no man's land, there's just a lack of understanding about the place. And most of the questions that we've heard, especially around the AU Center where we're involved, around Vine City English Avenue, where we're involved, and other parts of West Atlanta. It's what will it mean to us? And I think when you begin to talk about the walking distances, the travel distances, the things that are being proposed and talked about with the program, clearly it's a benefit to Georgia State students. Clearly it's a benefit to tourists, people that come for gaming events and all that. It's also a huge benefit to the everyday workers, or if I could say the everyday general population to the city of Atlanta. So much of it is exposure. Much of it is just sharing information where people can really understand the potential of what such a great project can mean in their backyard. So it's much more questions as opposed to pushback that we've been getting.
And I'd just like to piggyback off of what Herman shared. I think for the West Atlanta community, having the opportunity to actually connect to the rest of Atlanta. Northside Drive is huge. It's very wide, and it serves almost as a gulch itself. So to be able to redesign what's Northside Drive and ML King and connect those communities in a 21st century manner, more like a European walking city, then the community is very excited about that.
From a planning perspective, and this is something that, I'm not sure in all your classes if you learn it this way, but I think what most people, the average citizen, really care about is more fine-grained minutia detail. What does it look like? What material? How wide is the sidewalk? Those kinds of things. And usually at this phase in the process, it's way far before you get to that point. So you have a lot of people asking and wanting to know, better understand, they want to conceptualize, they want to picture what it is they're going to see. And so even though you talk about a building, they're more concerned with what is that going to look like at the street level? What am I going to experience? And so you have, I think, in a natural, planning process, you have these phases, and people are looking at it at different angles, and some are at a point where they want to know the details, and that's not ready yet. So it's a very difficult thing to have to be able to explain and ask input, but you may not have the full pictures yet. So you're doing renderings and you're doing concepts. And some people like this angle, and some people want to see what it's going to be like at the front door level. So it's it's not easy for these kinds of projects, even a small individual building, and then you take a collective area like this that has so many far-reaching impacts. But again, the potential, this project, this area, the study area as a whole, has so much potential. It's unbelievable what it would do for Atlanta and the region and the state. So it's exciting, but I think that's the difficult thing, and that's why Herman and Katrina are pointing out those kinds of things, that sometimes it's more questions that people have versus negativity. But there's a lot of fear too. There's been a history of trust us, we're going to build something and you're going to like it. And so you have a lot of obstacles to overcome that may be historically based and not necessarily based on this team. But I think that's why it's even more important to be transparent and go out. And quite frankly, when somebody says, well, we gave you public input, it's always great to say, well, these are the things we heard at the last meeting, and this is what we've changed based on your input. Those kinds of things over time, over the years, will help people see how their input has influenced things. But it's not an easy project on a good day when everybody's on the same sheet, let alone when you've got environmental issues that range from social issues to water issues to rats and to asbestos and to, there's a lot of stuff going on. You take one building down and you have lots of rats. So, it's a complex, it's a lot. So, yeah, there is, I'm sure, in the Constitution building. Check that out. Yeah, maybe they started the fire,
Actually, just to add, the funny, we laugh about the rats, but there's a great project in Manhattan right now called the 2nd Avenue Subway, and all these people hate the Upper East Side now because it is just infested with rats. So it's just it's actually a really serious concern.
Fun side of planning.
So my final question before I open it up to the audience is, what's the timeline for this project? Ballpark. For the whole thing or all of the above?
Well, our environmental document's looking at an opening year of 2018 with construction starting sometime in about 2015. That's all dependent on getting FTA's approval of the environmental documents, which we're looking at the end of next year. And then, so the MMPT would open in 2018. The development timeline, it's hard to say. What we're looking at is a full build out by about 2038, but that's all really market driven. The hope is there's some impetus immediately, and then it may, you know, some of the outer parcels may take a little more time.
Perfect. Okay, I would now like to open the forum up to the audience. I'll have Kate down here is going to pass around a microphone. So if you have any questions, just raise your hand and Kate will bring you a microphone. Questions? I can ask more questions if you don't want to. Questions.
Mike, was that you wanting to ask? Of course. Don't you have to let the students go first?
You guys mentioned a lot about the rail and then automated travel, but what about non-motorized transportation? Are there any accommodations for like bikes and pedestrians? Can you explain that?
The roadway network itself is going to use a complete streets concept, so bike lanes. The Wall Street extension and Alabama Street extension, we're looking for wide sidewalks, right? We want it to be a pedestrian-friendly environment. In terms of like a bike facility within the MMPT, as we mentioned, it's at 10% design. So if there was something in the future to accommodate a bike facility, I'm sure there's enough space in there to accommodate some of that mode.
We did look into a bike facility within the MMPT itself. So for those people who live close enough where they would bike to work, you can store your bicycle within the facility in a safe storage place. Even have showers or whatnot, so you can shower and then get on whatever mode of transportation and proceed on to your next destination. So there would be bike facilities possibly within the facility.
I'll add to that, and I think your point is similar to what I was just mentioning about community questions. Usually those design standards, I mean, you have a complete streets policy, but usually when you actually get down to measuring 10-foot lanes, 11-foot lanes, 5-foot sidewalk, you know, whatever the dimensions are of everything, that's usually done later in the process. So I would appeal to y'all as students now and perhaps not later to continue to expect those kinds of things and continue to communicate those to the project team throughout, because you know what they can do at this phase in the process at this level is they can actually say we're going to have complete streets policies and we're going to make sure that we design the right of way for that, but people have to stay on top of that. And I think, I mean, this would be a perfect place for bike share facilities and everything. I mean, this is a no-brainer. I will say that the Connect Atlanta plan did take into consideration the MMPT because, as we've mentioned, it's been on the books for quite a while. So regardless of the new street conditions that they have, there are still bike lanes, secondary and core routes specified for the area. So as long as y'all ask them to continue to make sure the design standards are there, the street facilities will really be able to accommodate that. And then I think it's all about the verticality too, making it easy to get up and down as a pedestrian and a bicyclist at that point. So that's the only other part.
You guys mentioned some uses that would be going on in there, like office and residential and hotel and stuff like that, which are all great. But I guess I'm concerned about, you know, a train station having those types of uses that don't really generate a lot of nighttime, like pedestrian traffic. I'm concerned about it being a dead zone at night. So what can be done like at this point to ensure that that doesn't happen and throughout the life of the project?
I was just going to say that's actually been a concern. That has been a concern raised publicly, you know, particularly the uses nearby. You do have Phillips Arena right there, which has nighttime events. You have MARTA, which operates late at night. Hopefully, this is the connection between the two, and so that providing entertainment-oriented uses, you know, large good restaurants, things like that, make this a nighttime corridor between 5 Points and Phillips. Heather, I don't know if you want.
I was seeing if we could see one of the previous slides. I think, Derek, you had a good slide that showed a specific angle, and I'm not sure if you can see it from here. But if you can imagine, let's see. What many previous planning efforts have looked at actually is the retail component, and the retail component being way beyond just serving office workers during the day, but actually having local serving retail. There is a, yeah, and it's that axonometric angle, right, number 9, I think. I can't see from this angle very well. Yeah, there you go. So if you can imagine, you could actually have a lot of retail along that corridor. That's restaurants, shops that are that are based on local residents buying things at night too. It really, I think the key message there is it must be beyond tourist-based special event day retail, and I think that's what a lot of people have continuously brought up, the need to fill that void, and that will help with having purpose and reason to go there. But the urban design, again, making sure that some of those things like glass at the street level, things like that, so you can feel like you're being seen and it's safe and it's comfortable. And plus, people like to people watch and be where people are. So if they can see the folks and see the activity, that'll help a lot. But I think the key message from a planning perspective is that it has to be not just special event or daytime serving retail.
One of the points that the master developer made when we were selecting this particular design was to have that street life, and also if you've got retail on both sides of the street, it tends to work better. So that was one of the factors in consideration when we cited the MMPT where it is.
One of the things that we also begin to look at both then and now is some of the importance of your other major neighbors or your other big drivers. Case in point, example, you don't go and hang out at the Georgia World Congress Center unless there's an event there. You don't take a walk through it. You don't say, oh, let's go to the Georgia World Congress Center and do something. You have to be able to transform those things. You see where there are some things, whether it's elements around Centennial Olympic Park, whether it's around stats, or even on the other side, there's some moments to the west of Northside Drive. What's really great about the project that we're talking about tonight is its ability to be part of the connective tissue, to get people walking where people can be safe and moving back and forth. There's an idea here about a transportation hub being a destination center. Even with special events, tonight if there's a Hawks game, it's like, let's get out of town as fast as we possibly can. Let's not stay, hang around, go to shops and bars and do that sort of stuff. Well, here's an opportunity that can be part of your transportation mode, but also part of what you do before and after a game. A number of cities are looking at those types of opportunities where it can be something special for event day, but also part of the urban fabric. And that's really part of what needs to happen. How do you transform some of the surrounding conditions so that they're very accessible and open to something like MMPT and back and forth, where it becomes a vibrant place to be, day and or night?
I was wondering if some of y'all could elaborate on the land situation, what kind of acquisition or demolition, if any, needs to occur to properly site this project.
You ready to see what buildings are demolished?
Well, the majority of the land within the building is owned by Norfolk Southern. The majority of the land within, can you guys hear me? Okay, I can't hear myself. It's owned by Norfolk Southern. The Atlanta Fulton County Rec Authority owns quite a bit of land, and then of course the MMPT itself will rest on the CNN parking deck. So that's the gist of the land, and of course there's the Constitution Building, which is an environmental resource which we will reuse, rehabilitate, and reuse it as a part of the MMPT itself. So that's about the bulk of the land itself.
Hi. It's interesting listening to planning conversations. And first of all, I think this is great to actually have here at Georgia Tech, where you have kind of the future of urban planning coming out of this, obviously, in all kinds of components. And so working on a project like, or bringing a project like this out of this kind of, being part of this kind of classroom setting is actually pretty wonderful. So with regards to how things like this kind of move forward, right? We're kind of talking about the future of how a city works with large projects. You've got the MMPT, and then you also have the Georgia Dome. What kind of innovative and creative ways are y'all working or liaising with the stadium and then also with City Hall with regards to how this whole thing goes down? And because it's one thing, as Heather's pointed out, right, to like, just trust us, don't worry, we got you, we won't mess this up, I promise. But then when it actually hits the ground, and how it's being planned really, and then how it hits the ground, really making sure that yes, communities are really being touched upon. I understand that you guys, reached out or whatnot, but is there part of the planning process where there's an actual liaison or there's relationships that are being built politically, and then also with a partner, especially something like the Dome, that's really huge. I can only imagine, right, that you guys are working very, very directly with the Dome and with City Hall, I would imagine.
Let me address the commitment thing.
The town guy's going to
Yeah.
address that one.
Right. If you don't like the answer, send me home. One of the beauties of the federal environmental review process is it's really difficult to change something once you're done. So the commitment, once GDOT receives what's called a record of decision, it's really hard to change stuff. So that's a good, solid path forward. Derek, I don't know if you want to talk about the stadium a little bit. Yeah.
Well, you're absolutely right. There has to be great coordination that needs to take place or will take place with the stadium. Now that the dust is settled and we know where the stadium will be constructed, we need to coordinate with the stadium folks and the Georgia World Congress Center folks, and of course the city of Atlanta and other folks who are involved with the project, just to make sure that we all know that the right hand knows what the left hand is doing, so we won't duplicate any efforts. So as we move the project forward, we will coordinate with them just to make sure that everything works together. And even Dr. Dobbins here in the Northside Drive study, and everything that's going on within that area needs to be well coordinated, because once construction starts, like one of our panelists said, at that area, it's going to be chaos for next couple of years. So, and we don't want one project after another to continue on.
One thing I'd like to say is that almost 5-6 years ago, we were doing a study of how to transform the Georgia World Congress Center. And it was really a cloak for what to do with the stadium. And we came up with 4 schemes then. And even back then, it was decided that the site to the south was the best thing to do. But every time we met with the community, it was, what are you doing on the other side of the street? And we had to say, our responsibilities stop on this side of the street. And over time, you keep hearing that enough, and you realize you have to do something. There's 3 really, really big discussions going on in the city right now. This is 1, the stadium is 2, area around the Braves Stadium is 3. And historically, projects like that and projects to that scale really are not good for neighborhoods. There's things about scale, there's things about uses, there's things about connectivity, and unless you really, really, really make an effort, you're going to make the mistakes you made the last time. So how do you begin to transform your urban landscape where you don't make these mistakes? There's been some really exciting work that has been happening here at Georgia Tech. Michael Dobbins has been leading studios. We've been leading studios. And there was a presentation that the president of Georgia Tech gave, and it was so exciting because he said that he desires to see Georgia Tech more engaged. He realizes that for some of the most dramatic things that have happened in the city, they started out as studio conversations. That's the 5th Street Bridge, that's Technology Square, that's the Beltline, that's Atlantic Station. It's a number of things. And some of those things were thoughts where that makes no sense at all. But it began to push people. And there's a lot of conversations that are being pushed, whether it's at City Hall, whether it's at Invest Atlanta, whether it's even with some of your developers that are really questioning, how do we make this a positive move? Yes, there's going to be some direct positive outcomes within the footprints of these buildings, but will be judged by what's the real impact that it has in the communities. Has it been something that has been able to transform the communities, the quality of life, the quality of living, all of those sort of things? So I think it's more than safe to say that there's a number of conversations on a number of different scales about how to make projects like this very positive and workable, and where it's going to be something where we don't make the same mistakes.
I hate to kind of throw this back on the citizens, but in a way, Herman's right. A lot of development, even if you're planners, and this is good for the students in the room, because as planners, you're supposed to go reach out to the other planner on another team and say, does your new street connect to my new street? And you want to coordinate that. But the realities are sometimes you're told you can't talk to anybody. You can't talk about the other side of the street. You can't look to the other side of the street, or the projects happen at different phases. And so they naturally don't have that opportunity for them to be happening exactly at the same time. So to me, what the answer to that is, and that naturally falls on, if individual decisions are made at the parcel level for the developer, then it falls naturally on that public space. And the public space in this case is the city of Atlanta, even if parcels are owned by other people. And so I think to some degree, while it's desirable to tell the project team here, hey, make sure that your new street connects to their new street, to some degree, it's going to be up to citizens to continue to remind every council member and the mayor every time for every conversation, are you asking those streets to meet up? What is the design of those streets? And those are really important things. And I think from an innovative standpoint, you've seen some cities really take into consideration the impacts from operations. That's what really hurts and helps residences or not. So even Washington around their baseball stadium. I believe it's baseball. I'm really not up on all my teams in their stadiums, but I believe it's their baseball stadium. Don't ask me the name of the team, but they actually created a residential-based parking program for game day and event traffic. So it really does take that and innovative design at the street level that's going to be really important. And Georgia Tech has incredible urban design as well, but I think it's also going to be up to the elected officials to continue to remind the teams together to sit down and work together, because sometimes you've got this many hours to do this much environmental analysis, and that's what you have to do. And so it's going to take somebody else with true leadership to say, okay, I need you guys and you guys, gals, people, to be together in these rooms and talk about this. So you bring up a very good question, and I think it's a philosophical debate for a lot of classes, because there's what you want to do and what makes sense logically, and then there's what the project in reality allows you to do. So maybe that's a good class question, Bruce.
Okay, Professor Dobbins, you have the honor of the last question of the evening.
I'll try not to go on too long. The issue that the young man back here raised is one that I heard raised last night at a forum that was over at Morehouse, in which was sort of hosted by Ambassador Young. And Egbert Perry, who's the principal of the I in the FIC group, lamented exactly what Heather was just talking about. He says, why don't we come up with something that connects all these different projects together? And basically what he did was to describe the program that we're doing in my studio this semester, the neighborhoods, the connectivity to the Atlanta University Center, the connectivity between big projects. And I guess my specific question is the traffic study that was done for the MMPT, which, by the way, that's not really a very catchy name for something that's exciting and you know, why can't it be the King Station or something like that? So, you know, MMPT, kind of forget about it. But the specific issue is that the traffic studies that were done for the MMPT on which the EIS is being performed did not anticipate the redirection, the realignment of the Martin Luther King Boulevard. So the other thing that the traffic studies didn't do was to consider, and Derek mentioned it earlier, what happens if we can get Northside Drive to plug right into Interstate 20? And they give you two ways to get to the interstate out of this area. The traffic study and the bus routing studies did not consider Northside Drive as a feeder into the multimodal station, even though it's 3 blocks away. So it strikes me, and really gets directly to what Heather's talking about. You had Project A working here and Project B working there, one of them doing things that's sufficient, you know, significantly changes the basis on which a lot of the decisions that are now being studied in the EIS were being made. And in fact, the Northside Drive study I did was the first time that representatives of the Falcons and representatives of FIC sat in the same room together, and that's a little odd. So I guess the specific question is, does the traffic study hold up when a project that's going to happen sooner is essentially really changed the traffic flow and basically fed 2 streets into 1 street, and how's that going to hold up through an EIS review?
We look forward to your comments on the draft environmental impact statement.
So it had to be a Georgia Tech professor to ask the traffic question. Right. So in terms of rerouting of streets, sure, you may see some of that impact, but the macro level analysis that we did in terms of the draw to the area, you know, the adding of the jobs that aren't there today, we feel that we took a conservative approach in not anticipating a mode shift. So you see a lot of cars drawn to the area, but are hopeful that building this and having the MMPT and future modes to come online will help alleviate some of that. You make a good point. We can add some of this roadway infrastructure, and the restriping of those roads can come on later to be as most efficient as we can for early phases of buses and connectivity over to north side. Should other projects come online, we are sort of bound by what's in the plan today in terms of our planning process. We looked at what was in the 5-year plan. We looked at what was in the Plan 2040 RTP, and we did the best we could with the data that we had at the time. So certainly there's opportunities in the future to fix some of those intersection improvements, but we feel like the first step is really adding the MMPT, and we can work on the little things later as needed.
I think, to be fair to Tim and HNTB and the rest of the crew, again, that I think falls on somebody bigger than the project team to demand a reset and a recalibration of those questions. And you don't need to do another traffic analysis to look at flows and the conversion of 2-way streets, how that would help, things like that. So they have to follow the federal process, which is very, very explicit and very clear of what you can look at, what you can't, and so forth. But there are always other groups that should be saying, now let's sit down and pair these up. And I think I personally believe that's going to be very important for the city of Atlanta to take the pole position on that and really start looking at these projects, because you do have new streets, you do have conversions of streets, you do have viaducts being redone. You have, what was the construction beginning is 2015 for this. MLK is supposed to be done by 2017 for the stadium. You've got 2018 for the MLK Viaduct next to Sam Federal Building. So all of these things, even if all the streets are perfect, the phasing alone needs to be paid attention to. So I really think that this is a good lesson for y'all, because in planning school, we think all these things have this nice process and you have this step and they all flow sequentially and everything's great. Well, the reality is things are on different schedules, and you might have, I mean, in fact, the traffic counts were done when Mitchell Street Bridge was closed. So the routing was already changed because of a street that was gone that's now open. So even the traffic counts are probably misleading. So it's all very difficult to place blame. And I think it's important that somebody at the city level has to start saying that these things have to be looked at as a group.
We look so far out that you can't come back and blame us.
2038?
Yeah, 2038. So if you can find us in 2038.
One other thing that's really important when you begin to talk about streets, and not just the traffic counts, but with some of the images that you're seeing on the screen, it's a beautiful, iconic destination / place to be. And when you're on Martin Luther King and you're headed into downtown, this site really begins to become something of a gateway to downtown. Most importantly, how many times have we been to other cities and we've been on a Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard Drive and it's a B street? This is an opportunity to really transform Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard Drive. I think that's it, yeah. And one of the things that the city is very adamant about is that if you don't get MLK Jr. Boulevard Drive right here in the city of Atlanta, when are you ever going to get it right? And when you begin to look at some of the product, some of the potential, and especially being spearheaded, anchored, whatever word you want to use, by such a project, it begins to set a whole new bar for the importance of the corridor, for the importance of the AU Center, for the importance of the communities, and the list goes on and on. So again, looking back to siting, looking back to where to really create your mass, your critical mass, there's a number of very important things that are going on with the project, that are going on with the street, that can really help to transform the city of Atlanta.
Thank you. So to round out our presentation, we will do two more quick. So after what you've learned today, how often do you think you'll take advantage of this facility? Different options. It's text to the exact same number as before. Nice. I like that very few people said never. That's positive. Nice spread there. And then one last question. Are you in support of this project? Yes, undecided, no. Take into consideration the people who have planned this project are sitting up here, but don't worry about that. Yeah, and potential employers as well. Oh, look at those yeses. Shocker. Glad to hear it. Whoever answered no. Well, thank you everyone for coming. It's been a really great event. Learned a lot about this project. Thank you especially to all of our speakers.